watching Miami Temple Kids.
There's a spirit I cannot contain. There's a spirit I cannot contain. The same power that raised Jesus up from the grave. The same spirit I cannot contain. Everywhere I go on this road, high and low, where I go with you. So I won't be afraid, this my home. What may, where I go with you. Oh, 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 where I go with you. Oh, 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 where I go with you. Your breath upon these bones, your fire in my soul. Your kingdom is my home, and I don't walk alone. Everywhere I go on this road, high and low, where I go with you. So I won't be afraid, this my home, come what may, where I go with you.
Good morning, guys, and happy Sabbath. Today is October 24th, and we're so excited that you have joined us for another lesson review with our Miami Temple teachers. Remember, if you're in primary, juniors, or early teen class, you guys have a Zoom lesson at 1 p.m. with our teachers. If you're not a member of Miami Temple and you're interested in joining one of our Zoom lessons, please email me to children@miamitemple.org. We have a small form for you to fill out. Send it back to us and we will give you the link for the following week. For right now, though, it's time to listen to our lessons with our teachers. We'll see you guys in a little bit, okay? Bye! Happy Sabbath, beginners class. Today is October 24th. Do you guys remember what your memory verse is? I pray that your health is good. That's right. Do it one more time with me. I pray that your health is good. Good job, guys. I'm so proud of you. Now, do you remember what the story is about? It's kind of a little sad story. It starts sad. There was a rich man named Jairus, and he had a daughter who was very, very sick. He had heard that Jesus had come to visit his town, and he wanted Jesus to please heal his daughter. So he said, I am going to go find Jesus and I'm going to ask him to please heal my daughter. And so he did. He went down the road and he found Jesus. Now, many people had heard that Jesus was healing other people. And so they had come to talk to Jesus also. There was a huge crowd around him and Jairus couldn't get to Jesus. Finally, when he did get to Jesus, he kneeled down and he said, Lord, please heal my daughter. At that time, there was another woman who was very sick, and Jesus stopped to help her also. And Jairus was here thinking, please, Lord, my daughter is dying, please. But Jesus cares for everybody, and so he stopped to help the woman, and he healed her also. Then Jairus' servant came and told Jairus, don't bother Jesus anymore. your daughter has died." Oh, that made Jairus so very sad. That made Jesus very sad too. But he told Jairus, "Don't worry, I'm going to go to your house." When Jesus got to Jairus' house, everyone around his daughter was crying because they were so sad. Jairus' daughter had died. And Jesus told them, "Get out of the room, everybody out of the room." And he went to see the little girl. When he saw the little girl, he said, "Don't worry, she's just sleeping." People looked at Jesus and started to laugh. Do we laugh at Jesus? No, we trust and we obey. So Jesus said, "Little girl, wake up." And that little girl woke up. Look at that. She woke up. She woke up from the dead. Jesus had brought her back to life. Jairus and his wife were so happy, and everybody was happy around them. Jairus' daughter, she was hungry. Jesus told them, "Give this little girl some food to eat." Jesus cares for us so very much. He cares for everyone around us. All we have to do is pray and ask him for help. So I want you guys to repeat your Sabbath school lesson memory verse, okay? Ready? Stand up. Stand up. I pray that your health is good. Good job, guys. That was excellent. Now it's time for our Sabbath school poem. So don't sit down. Don't sit down. Ready? From the top of my head to the tips of my toes, I will be Jesus' child wherever I go. We'll see you guys next week. Happy Sabbath. Bye.
God has helped his people. Luke 7, verse 16. Happy Sabbath. Bye.
It's another Sabbath, kindergartners. And once again, I have a story to tell you about Jesus. Now, Kaylee, thank you so much for helping us with the memory verse. And you're going to hear it as I go through the story. Okay. Now, remember, people are telling other people what Jesus has been doing and how he's making people well. So Jesus was on his way now to a city called Nain, a town, I guess. Now, these towns have walls around them, usually to keep people in that live there and to keep people out, maybe who don't live there. So as Jesus and his friends were walking towards Nain, they saw people coming out of the gates of the wall, and they were carrying somebody on I guess like a flatbed. And Jesus could tell that this young man was dead. And he saw people walking on the sides of this young man who had died. And he saw this lady walking really close by, and he could hear her crying even though he wasn't that close. She was really sad because it was her son who had died. And she was a widow. You know what a widow is? A woman whose husband had died. And this was her only son. And now he had died. So she was all alone, and she was really very sad. And she was crying, and her friends were crying with her. So there was a really loud noise because people, they were really crying hard. They were really sad for this lady. So as Jesus came a little closer, the people with the dead man were walking by, and Jesus put his hand on the bed where they were carrying the man, or the young boy, I guess it was, young man. And when the people who were carrying him saw Jesus touch the thing they were carrying, they stopped and they wondered, what is Jesus going to do? Because they had heard all these great things that Jesus had done. So they wanted to see what was going to happen. So Jesus, before that, he had said to the mother, "Don't cry." And she was wondering, why would Jesus say that to her? But I think she might have heard of Jesus. So she was watching to see what he would do also. Jesus went over to the young man, and he said to the young man, "Young man, I say to you, get up." And the young man got up. He came back to life. Now the people who are watching, their mouth might be hanging open like, what did we just see? That was amazing. And Jesus took the little boy and gave the little boy to the mom. And now the mom was so happy. I think the tears now were happy tears. Although she sort of had dried up the sad tears, and now the happy tears were coming. And the friends that were around her were so happy. And everybody was saying, wow, this is amazing. Look what Jesus did. And they were joyful as they walked back into their town. They had come out sad, but they were going back happy. Now, God is wonderful, isn't he? He cares about anything that makes us sad. He cared about this widow whose only son had died, and he brought the son back to life to make her happy again. And the son, of course, he didn't know anything that he had died. It was just like a sleep to him. Because when you're dead, you don't know anything. And you don't just walk around and talk unless a miracle is performed by Jesus. So, in your memory verse, what did Kaylee tell you again? Yeah. God has come to help his people. And that's what these people were saying, because they realized that Jesus was God, because he is. And they said, God has come to help his people. That's your memory verse. And where's that found? In your pretend Bibles. That's found in Luke 7, verse 16. God has come to help his people, and he's here now. He helps us. So remember that whenever you're sick or whenever somebody else is sick, you can pray for them so God can heal them. And I have a sentence for you, and I'm going to show you one word at a time. See if you can remember the whole sentence. All right? No problem. That's an easy one. Is, what did we hear? No problem is, all right? No problem is too big. No problem is too big or too small. No problem is too big or too small for Jesus. Can you say that with me? No problem is too big or too small for Jesus. Remember that, folks, as we go through our week and come back again next Sabbath so I can tell you another story. Okay, until then, bye.
God has been gracious to me, and I have all I need. Genesis 33, verse 11. Happy Sabbath. Bye.
Good morning, Primary Sabbath School class. Happy Sabbath to every one of you. Thank you, Malachi, for reminding us of our memory verse for this week. I'm going to begin this week's lesson with a story about myself. When I was your age, or maybe even a little bit older, I did something wrong. I know that's hard to believe, that I would do something wrong, but I did something wrong. I was playing ball inside the house. And you know what happens sometimes when you play ball inside the house? The ball gets away from you and something breaks. In my case, it was a decoration on our mantle in our family room. You know what I did? I took that broken decoration and I hid it. And I didn't tell anyone about it because I was afraid of what was going to happen when people found out. I knew that my parents were going to be so upset. Well, Jacob is feeling the same way about Esau in this story. He knows that he did wrong, and he knows that Esau is going to be so mad at him. And so he's really worried. He's headed home, but the closer he gets, the more he's worried about how his brother is going to act and going to receive him. In fact, Jacob is so worried that he sends a huge gift ahead to his brother to ask for his forgiveness. So we're going to learn more about forgiveness and serving others in this week's story. Enjoy!
Enrique offered Andy half of his sandwich. Earlier that morning, Andy had laughed at how Enrique had pronounced a certain word. Enrique's feelings had been hurt, but he wanted to show Andy that he forgave him and still wanted them to be friends. Sharing is a way to show someone how we feel about them. In the story today, Jacob shared with Esau. Jacob was returning to his homeland. God had told him to, but he was a little nervous. Jacob remembered how he had tricked Esau into selling him his birthright. He remembered how he had tricked their father into giving him the special blessing that should have been Esau's. Would Esau still be angry with him? Jacob turned to God for help, and God sent angels to be with him. Jacob sent messengers to greet Esau. "This is what you are to say to my master Esau," he directed. "Your servant Jacob says," and then he told them the rest of the message. He also told them that they were to call Esau, "my lord Esau." This would tell Esau that Jacob did not claim any inheritance. But the messengers returned with frightening news. Esau was approaching with 400 men. Would Esau attack? Jacob wondered. Again, Jacob turned to God. Then Jacob sent Esau a message and many animals as gifts. He directed his messenger to say, "Your servant Jacob is coming behind us." That night Jacob sent his family and all his possessions across a stream called Jabbok, but he stayed behind by himself, and there he met God. All night he wrestled with an angel. Then he begged for a blessing and received it. The next day Jacob saw Esau and his 400 men coming. Quickly Jacob divided his family. He put the children with their mothers. Then he went to the front of the group. While still a long way from Esau, Jacob bowed low to the ground. Then he walked on and bowed again. Jacob did this 7 times until they were very close. But when Esau saw Jacob, he ran to him. He threw his arms around him, and they both began to cry. Jacob must have felt such relief. After a little while, Esau asked, "Who are all these people with you?" "This is the family God has given me," Jacob told him. After the introductions, Esau asked, "What about all that you sent before you? What does that mean?" Jacob replied, "These are my presents to you, my brother. I want you to know that I need your mercy and forgiveness." "I already have plenty, Jacob. Keep what is yours," Esau responded graciously. But Jacob said, "No, please, accept these gifts. It will show me that you have truly forgiven me. God has been good to me, and I have all I need." Esau finally accepted the gifts. Then he said, "Let us be on our way. I'll travel with you." "Thank you, Esau," Jacob replied gratefully, "but we really need to travel much slower than you do. We have so many children and young animals." "Then let me leave some of my men with you," Esau responded. "No, thank you," said Jacob. "I only want to please you, my master." Esau left then and went on ahead. Jacob, with his large family and flocks, followed slowly. Finally, they reached Shechem in the land of Canaan, Jacob's homeland. There, Jacob purchased land. After 20 years, he would finally have a home, a place for his family and his flocks. Even though he was anxious to reach Canaan, Jacob put his family's needs first. When we truly serve others, we will be considerate of their needs too.
Hi, I'm Tristan Aristide, and this is our memory verse. 2 are better than 1 because they have good returns for their labor. If either of them falls down, the other one can pick the other one up. But pity anybody who falls and has no one to pick them up. Ecclesiastes 4, verses 9 and 10. Happy Sabbath, everybody. Bye.
Happy Sabbath, Junior family. We are here on lesson 4. And the title for this week's lesson is Talent Turns Toxic. Now, this lesson is a special lesson because it's talking about families and about David's family in particular. Now, David had many sons and he had a daughter, but his most talented son was named Absalom. Absalom was not only talented, he was very handsome. And even though he was all of that, he thought that he could run the country better than King David. You know what, guys? God has given us parents so they can sandwich us in love. And we are all supposed to work together. Moms, dads, children, as a team, as a unit. So when Absalom went against his father, he kind of tore that love apart. But we're going to find out later on that all of that sin that he had inside of him turned out to be destructive to Absalom at the end. And it destroyed partially David too. Now, as you study the lesson, I want you to remember the PowerPoint, which is we accomplish more by working with rather than working against one another. Let's work together as a family. And parents, this afternoon, talk to your kids about how are ways that you guys can work together as a family, not only to bring God's kingdom, but in everyday things. What are things that you guys can do? Is it through obedience? Is it through sacrifice? Is it through love? Is it through sharing what you have? Find ways that you can come together as a team. Happy Sabbath, and I'll see you later in our Zoom class. Bye.
Hey kids, today we have another outrageous story for you. This time about King David.
David was the king of Israel. He had lots of kids, one named Absalom.
Now kids, that doesn't mean he had a really long torso. That was just his name. Get it? Absalom.
Absalom was a pretty good-looking guy. In fact, he was the handsomest guy in all of Israel.
He had beautiful long flowing hair and strong muscles.
But there's something else you need to know about Absalom. Handsome Absalom was ugly on the inside.
Absalom spent years of his life trying to get everyone in Israel to like him.
And eventually it worked. But then he did something very terrible.
He convinced all those people that liked him to turn against his dad, David.
He wanted the people to rebel against King David and even kill him.
When David found out, he had to run away from his own country, even though he was the king.
Kids, never do this to your parents. It's super rude.
For we do not have a priest who is unable to emphasize our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not sin. Let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. Hebrews 4:15 through 16.
Hello, my early teens. Happy Sabbath. How are you? Well, I hope. Well, this week we studied lesson number 4, which is entitled Jesus, our High Priest, the Great Appointment. Now, before I get into it, I want to thank Jasmine, who just reminded us what this week's memory verse was all about. Now, I don't know if you're the type of person who likes mysteries, enigmas, puzzles, and things to solve, because this week's lesson is a doozy. A lot of people, even Seventh-day Adventists who have been in the church for a long time, are kind of confused about what it's all about. Yeah, it's about Jesus being our high priest. It's about October 22nd, 1844, also known as the Great Disappointment. Now, some of you, because of Pathfinders or baptismal class, or because you're older early teens, or your parents have talked to you about it, know what this is all about. And others are completely confused, befuddled, not bamboozled, but Yeah, gobsmacked because you don't know what I'm talking about. Well, the video that we're about to see in a few minutes explains a lot of it. And of course, at 1 p.m. during our Zoom meeting, we'll talk about it in great detail. So, until then, please enjoy the video. See you soon.
Hi. We've been getting stuck into the letter to the Hebrews, and you remember that the big message to those Christians who'd all grown up in Hebrew families was this: don't walk away from Jesus. But why? Well, because Jesus is God speaking to us, and because Jesus is so much more important than Moses, the Jewish superhero, who'd served God's family faithfully for years and years and years. But Jesus is God's promised perfect king. And in our bit from this letter today, we get a third huge reason for not walking away from Jesus. And it's this: that Jesus is the perfect high priest. Here it is. We have a great high priest who's gone through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God. High priest? Why is that a reason to stick with Jesus? Why do I need a priest? Well, here's the thing. We actually desperately need the perfect high priest, because that means that Jesus is the perfect mediator. Let me explain that word. Just imagine you and your best friend. So you're really good mates. You have loads of fun together, and then you have this big row, a huge argument. You both end up saying really hurtful things to each other, and the result is that you're separated. You can't talk to each other. You can't be in the same room as each other. You can't even bear to look at each other. You're enemies. And this goes on for days and days, until one day another friend whom you both know and like gets you both together in the same room and gets you talking to each other and gets you to say sorry to each other. And you end up in a big hug and you're friends again. Hurrah! Your friend is being a mediator. He brings the two enemies together to become friends. Okay, that was just a silly example, but with us and God, it's much bigger and more important than that. Because you see, God is perfect and holy, and we are not. We fail every day to go God's way. We rebel against him, living as if he's not there. We think to ourselves, shove off, God, I'm in charge. No to your ways. And the Bible calls that sin, and sin is deadly. If nothing is done about it, it will separate us from God forever. How can we be brought back into being friends with God? We need a mediator, someone who will be in the middle, who brings us together. And the Hebrews who were reading this letter knew that God in the Old Testament generously gave them mediators. They were called high priests. They were mediators between God and the Hebrew people. God chose who the high priest should be, and once a year the high priest would go into the holy place in the temple and through the great big heavy curtain into the most holy place, just once a year and alone. But he couldn't just walk through that curtain and chat to God. No, because he's a sinner just like all of us. God would have every right to shut out the high priest and all the people. But remember that the high priest was God's mediator between him and the sinful Hebrew people. So before the high priest went in behind the curtain, he had to kill an animal, a young bull. That's how serious our sin is. And that was a picture of how the high priest's sin could only be forgiven if something or someone else took his punishment. And then he killed another animal, a goat. And that was a picture of how the people's sin could only be forgiven if something or someone else took that punishment. So when the high priest went in behind the curtain, God, who had taught them how to do all this, accepted the sacrifice of those animals. So the high priest, the mediator, and the people were not shut out. They were forgiven. They were made friends with God again. But that is just a picture of something much, much better and more amazing that God was planning to do. You see, he was planning to send the perfect high priest. You see, the priests in the Old Testament had two problems. One was that they were sinners, just like the rest of us, but also they had a habit of getting old and dying, so they needed to be replaced. But God was planning to send the perfect high priest, Jesus. You see, Jesus is perfectly God and perfectly man. So he's God's son, but when he came to this earth, he had a weak human body just like ours. And he was tempted to be a sinner just like us. But he didn't sin. He obeyed his Father God perfectly. Look at this. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to feel sympathy for our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are. Yet he did not sin. So Jesus is the mediator who doesn't have that problem of sin, and neither does Jesus need to be replaced, because Jesus defeated death. He's living back with his Father God in heaven, and he won't ever die again. So Jesus is the mediator who keeps us friends with God. Look at this verse. He is able to save completely those who come to God through him, because he always lives to intercede or be a mediator for them. Isn't that wonderful? Jesus is the mediator who keeps us friends with God forever. And what was the sacrifice that he brought? An animal? No, it was himself on the cross. And as our priest, Jesus is always there, and we can always go to him for forgiveness. Oh, we might imagine that Jesus is thinking, not you again. What? Not that sin again. I'm fed up with having to forgive you for that. When will you get yourself sorted out? No, Jesus isn't like that. We can always go to Jesus as failures and find forgiveness.
And that was our Sabbath School lesson review with our teachers. I hope you guys enjoyed it. So parents, between now and the 11 a.m. service, take a little time to review the lesson with your children. Also, if you're in primary, juniors, and early teen class, we have Zoom lessons for you guys at 1 p.m. If you're interested in joining one of our Zoom lessons, just email me to children@miamitemple.org. We'll see you guys next week. Happy Sabbath. Bye.
Feel it in the air right now. It's all around, I see it everywhere. It's the power, yeah, God's power. It's the power to move any star. It's the power to heal your broken heart. It's the power, yeah, God's power. So don't hold back, no, don't hold still. God is here and he is real. Take 4 steps to the left, to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4. Turn it around and move to the right. 1, 2, 3. Now take tiny little jumps forward to the front. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 jumps back, but you better look back. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now freeze. And everybody clap your hands. Now stop. I feel it in the air right now. It's all around, I see it everywhere. It's the power, yeah, God's power. It's the power to move any star. It's the power to heal your broken heart. It's the power, yeah, God's power. So don't hold back, no, don't hold still. God is here and he Now stop.
You're watching Miami Temple Kids.